How you doing, good people? This is Dave Bit Animal. Okay, so we've pretty much gone this entire video series without talking about two games that we pretty much need to talk about if we're going to talk about the 16-bit war. They're both character-driven mascot type games. They're both platformers, and they were both representative of packing games for the respective publishers, for the respective consoles, I should say. And they both provided us with a whole lot of memories. The two franchises we're going to talk about today are Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario Brothers. And we're going to focus on a few key titles in the back libraries of both games, because there were so many games released during the 16-bit console generation featuring both. Okay, so Sonic the Hedgehog popped up on the Sega Genesis in 1991, I should say. And Sonic was a bit of a departure from what you were getting from as far as the Mario Brothers franchise, because there was a little more attitude there with Sonic, a little more edge. You know, it wasn't some cute cuddly animal, it was a hedgehog, you know, that type of thing. And he was smashing TV monitors to get power-ups, so that's something else entirely. And Sonic was supposed to identify with this counterculture that was supposed to be, you know, he was supposed to be hip and edgy and all of that. And for the most part, Sonic drove sales of the Sega Genesis in huge numbers. He proved to be the killer app that Sega needed. Now, not to be outdone, when the Super NES launched in 1991, I'm sorry. When the Super NES launched, it launched with Super Mario World as a pack-in title. And Super Mario World was a huge title comparative to any other game in this franchise, whereas Sonic was, you know, it was a certain number of levels, everything was kind of linear. Mario World was a huge adventure, and it was a huge experience. And we later found out that, you know, playing through Super Mario World, if you did it a certain way, it actually doubled the size of the game. So there was that part of it. And for years, the debate raged. What was better, Super Mario World or Sonic the Hedgehog? Well, Sega released a sequel to Sonic a few years later, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 pretty much had that same core gameplay, but it introduced the second character into the fray, which made it possible for two-player gameplay in the Sonic franchise. Tails. Tails had a few special moves of his own. He could fly, he could pick Sonic up and help him through levels, things like that. And you could also use him as a non-playable co-op backup assist character or whatever. For years, though, there was no follow-up to Super Mario World. Now, we did get Super Mario All-Stars, which was basically the equivalent of an HD remix of sorts, where it was 16-bit rehashes of the original 3 Super Mario Brothers titles, as well as the Japanese. We finally got that Japanese Super Mario Brothers 2 in the US, the one that was deemed too difficult for American gamers. And that was because those games were so good, and the second game, this original Super Mario 2, dubbed The Lost Levels, was so good and so well done that gamers really didn't mind the fact that it was essentially the same game, just with better, with a better soundtrack and better graphics than the original titles. And they bought it, and it was popular, very popular. Sonic, there was a third sequel for the Sonic titles. And at this point, Sega starts to push this whole speed, Sonic is faster, Sonic is cooler, Sonic is hipper, Sonic is more edgy. Starts to push that and starts to run in direct competition with Nintendo. While Nintendo is continuing to say, okay, our title is just, it doesn't have all these gimmicks, it's simply a better title. That's what Nintendo was doing. And both publishers were correct. Sonic was this really fast, this really edgy character, whereas Super Mario World was just an expansive, huge title. And after the release of Sonic 3, and we're still waiting for this follow-up to Super Mario World, this real sequel, we finally got it in, I want to say, 1994, 95. In the form of Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. Now, Yoshi's Island, you don't directly play as Mario, you play more as Yoshi. And Yoshi is taking care of baby Mario, who is, your ride-along during the course of this game. And it is an amazing title. It's well put together. It's beautiful. It uses the Super FX chip, which boosts the graphics. The game has this coloring book, almost this coloring book art style. The music is phenomenal, and it's just a joy to play through. Sega kind of does something ultra revolutionary at this point with their next Sonic title, which is the fourth one at this point. And that title is Sonic and Knuckles. Now, Sonic and Knuckles features this lock-on technology where you could plug Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 into it, and you can put Knuckles, the Echidna, who is pretty much a villain in the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 title, one of the villains, or misunderstood villain, or anti-hero, whatever you want to call him. You can plug Knuckles into those games, and it kind of changes up the gameplay and all of that, and just gives you a different experience. So, in all seriousness, Sega and Nintendo both put out some really good stuff at this point. It's just that Nintendo took a little more time putting out their efforts. There was one other title that Nintendo put out, though, during the 16-bit console generation that's really noteworthy as far as titles with Mario in them. And that would be the combat racing game, the game that kind of changes the way we play racing games to this day, and that's Super Mario Kart. And Super Mario Kart featured characters from Mario Lexicon, including Donkey Kong Jr., Toad, Koopa Troopa, Yoshi, the Princess, all these other characters, and they race in tracks inspired by different areas in the Mushroom Kingdom. And that game, like I said, has essentially changed the way we play racing games. The Mario Sonic rivalry ran until there were really strong Mario titles and really strong Sonic titles on handhelds, home consoles, up until the early 2000s, with the demise of the Sega Dreamcast, with Sega becoming just a third-party game maker. Sonic has since appeared in titles with Mario, and in one of the more interesting spins on this rivalry, you could play as Sonic in a fighting game in Super Smash Bros. Brawl and fight Mario. So that was a really interesting wrinkle in that whole thing. There is no denying that both franchises were incredibly influential to this rivalry between Nintendo and Sega. And with this, the 16-bit console generation being the last console generation fully dominated by those two companies, Nintendo and Sega, it's really good to look back at those franchises and look at what was the high points. What were the high points for those franchises? This has been 8-Bit Animal. Tomorrow is the final video in the record of the 16-bit war. I hope you guys tune in and check it out.